Work, just
Okay.
talk to the mic when you're ready. Okay then, Ed, we're gonna start, ready?
Ready whenever you are.
Okay, we'll call to order the City of Manistee Brownfield Redevelopment Authority of December 16th, 2022 at 10:05 or 6, sorry about that. And we'll have the roll call if you could.
Yoder,
Yes.
Fink. Yes. Lamberto,
Yes.
Laram,
Yes.
and Bradford.
Yes.
Alrighty, moving
We
on.
also have our consultant, Roman Wilson from Fishbeck. Some of you haven't met Roman before, but he's dialing in virtually as well.
Good morning, Roman.
Oh, hello, Roman.
Good morning.
All right, Ed?
Yep.
Okay, at this time, the approval of agenda. At this time, the Brownfield Redevelopment Authority can act to approve or amend the agenda.
I'll make a motion to approve the 12-16 agenda.
I'll need a second to that.
I'll second it.
All right, any discussion over it? If not, call the roll, please.
Yoder,
Yes.
Fink,
Yes.
Lamberto,
Yes.
Laram,
Yes.
motion passed.
All
I'm
right,
sorry, I have to ask for clarification. Ed, are you a voting member or are you administrator?
No, I'm not. I'm just
Okay.
the administrator, so.
Okay, thank you.
all right. Okay, moving along to public hearing. We have none, right? Okay.
No public hearing.
Public comments. This time, Chair will ask if there's any public comments. Obviously not, we have no public. Correspondence. This time, the Chair will ask if any correspondence has been received to be included in the record.
We have not received any.
No correspondence. Approval of minutes. At this time, the Brownfield Redevelopment Authority can act to approve the March 7th, 2022 meeting minutes.
I'll make a motion to approve the minutes.
All righty. Seconded by,
I can second it.
second, okay, and any discussion? If none, call the roll, please.
Okay. Yoder,
Yes.
Fink,
Yes.
Lamberto,
Yes.
Laram,
Yes.
motion passed.
All right. And now we move to financial reports. At this time, the Brownfield Redevelopment Authority can act to approve the financial reports. We'll start with the balance sheet, and that'll be Ed, right?
Yeah, so I included a balance sheet and a revenue and expense report for the board. There is no revenue and expenditures for this fiscal year. That will change. But on the balance sheet, you can see we've got about $107,000 of cash, but almost $76,000 of that is due to various brownfield plans that I distribute typically in August. So we capture taxes on both the summer and winter tax roll throughout the year, and then I distribute them once a year and report to the state. So our fund balance is approximately $31,000, and that's working capital that this board uses to fund its operations, some training for myself, travel, any supplies we need, and any other consultants that we might need to hire. So if there's no questions, I don't have anything else to add.
If I might ask, Ed, with the two, or, well, probably I could say 3 new members we have, and you say for training, would it make sense to try to have some sort of a training for us or not?
Well, I think what I'd like to do, because we're short a member and I don't know who we're going to get for that, is I'd like to set up a session with our consultant, Roman, and or his coworker, Kirk, and we can set up a time where we can do a virtual training, and I think that's going to be way more effective than trying to find like Brownfield 101 training. I don't even know if there is any of that, but we can certainly bring everybody up to speed. I have a bunch of background information that I can provide too, so I think that's a good suggestion, Roger, and we can try to get that scheduled.
Yeah, all right, thank you. Is there anything else, or do we need motions?
Yeah, probably a motion to accept the balance sheet and the revenue and expense report.
Okay, if you're finished. All right, so we'll need a motion to accept the financial report of the balance sheet and the revenue and expense.
I'll make a motion to accept the financials.
All righty, and we'll need a second.
I'll second.
There you go. Seconded. Any discussion? Go ahead then. Call roll, please.
Okay. Yoder,
Yes.
Fink,
Yes.
Memberto,
Yes.
Laram.
Yes.
Motion passed.
All right, moving then to old business, we have none. Okay, moving into new business. We have an adoption of the fiscal year 2023 budget. The Brownfield Authority has not met since March of 2022 due to lack of agenda items. The 2023 fiscal year started July 1, 2022, and the proposed fiscal year 2023 budget needs to be approved. This time, the Brownfield Redevelopment Authority can act to approve the fiscal year 2023 budget.
So I'll walk you through this real quick. It's not very complicated. Our revenues basically come in two main areas. If we don't have grants, which we don't have any, and those are brownfield administration fees, which are fees that are charged to our existing brownfield plans. We get an annual fee from those typically. And then the second fee would be any applications that we receive for new brownfield plans and or payments to prepare the actual brownfield plan and the Act 381 work plan and the development and reimbursement agreements. So I have a kind of a placeholder number in there. That number is variable depending on what projects come forward. And we never really know necessarily. We have an idea, but timing is kind of variable on these. So it's kind of a conservative budget in the sense that it's kind of low. Probably we may have more charge for services if more brownfield plans come forward. And then on the expense side, we pencil in money for operating supplies, which we typically don't spend because we don't really have that much. Most stuff's done electronically, so it's not like we're printing things. That may change, but it's just a placeholder. We have a number in there for consultant, which is Fishbeck. We require people that are going to do a brownfield plan through the City Brownfield Authority to use our consultant to prepare the plan. And that just saves, we're going to pay the consultant to review a plan that their consultant does anyway, and it may not be prepared correctly or it may not have the aspects that we need. This way we get a plan that's solid and everybody gets to look at it and we can make sure it's right. And we've done that since the Brownfield Authority was formed and back when we had a different consultant even. So that has worked very well for us. Administrative services, I pencil in a number to reimburse my time as a city employee. I've never charged it. At some point we might, but I just haven't. Even though this role is taking up considerably more time than it has in the past, just because there's a lot of developer interest. That number would actually probably be light if I actually charge back my time. Travel and training, I'm a member of the Michigan Economic Development Association, and I occasionally go to a training conference, so that's what that number's for. Same thing with the membership and dues. There's an annual fee. I find that organization to be very helpful. They have a lot of good information, and they have resources that we can draw on if there's questions or we want to talk to other economic development folks about a particular issue. So I think it's a good investment. Printing and publishing would be if we had to issue any public notices in the newspaper for a public hearing, or if we wanted to publish any other type of materials. So the budget shows a slight deficit of $4,500, but we have plenty of fund balance to absorb that. And as you can see over the past few years, I've got the history in there. We've kind of been growing our fund balance. So that fact that we have this tentative budgeted deficit really isn't a concern. And probably, like I say, things are variable in the budget anyway, so it may not come out that way. Does anybody have any questions?
I just have one, Ed. This is Shelley. The projected revenues, I know you said that we have a fund balance, but if the projected revenues aren't realized, is that money allocated as far as an encumbrance, or how is that moved over if you don't actually realize the revenue?
Well, we won't incur hardly any of those professional and consulting services. Those two are kind of tied together. Okay. So if we don't get a brownfield plan application that needs to be looked at, then we won't have as many consultant fees. So those kind of run together concurrently. The idea is that the applicant for a brownfield plan pays 100% of the consultant's costs. Now, we do have miscellaneous consultant costs, like if I'm consulting with Roman on a separate matter that's not part of a new brownfield plan or work plan, we'll have some of those fees. And I've tried to build a little bit of that in here, so we will have that, but that's kind of how that works. And if we don't spend the money, it just stays in our fund balance.
Okay, like you said, it's very conservative, so I appreciate it. Thank you.
Yep.
Any other questions for Ed?
And I guess one more comment is, moving forward, we're going to try to do this probably in a June meeting or maybe a May meeting, probably June, just on an annual basis. It's just one of those things that didn't happen this year, but that's going to be the plan moving forward.
Yeah, I apologize. I had one more question. So you said that. So if the fiscal year wasn't adopted in July when the year started, so is there any repercussion because of that, or it's just when the next meeting happens?
Yeah, no, not really. And that's, I mean, we've gone to meeting as needed because we don't want to waste anybody's time. But this is one of those ones that we probably should have just called a meeting just to do this. But it was super busy that time last year with stuff, and it just didn't get happen. So that one's on me. And as I said, we'll schedule a meeting in May or June to approve the draft budget. So at a minimum, we'll have a January meeting every year because we have to reappoint the officers. And that sort of thing. We're going to have a January meeting coming up to do some other things as well, so that works out well. And then even if we had nothing else to approve, we'd at least have to have a May or June meeting to do the budget. So that's the plan moving forward.
Okay, thank you.
I think that's it for us up here, Ed.
So we need to adopt the budget if there aren't any other questions.
All right. We need a motion to adopt the budget.
I'll make a motion to approve the proposed fiscal 2023 budget.
I'll second it.
Second it.
I'll second it.
Any discussion over it? Would you call roll, please?
Yes. Yoder,
Yes.
Fink,
Yes.
Manberto,
Yes.
Lara.
Yes.
Motion passed.
All right. And moving then to A of new business. Review of the Brownfield redevelopment application received from River Street Hotel LLC. The Brownfield Redevelopment Authority has received an application for a redevelopment project funding from River Street Hotel LLC. This would be a proposed 5-suite hotel and restaurant located at 348 River Street. It is the former Reedmore and Music Vault. The application has been reviewed by the Fishback and the city. The project anticipates an investment of about $3.5 million, and the proposed TIF financing includes about $250,000 in eligible cost, including environmental assessment, demolition, abatement, and the site preparation cost. Okay, at this time, the Brownfield Authority can act to accept the application, authorize Fishbeck to continue to work on the Brownfield Plan, Act 381, the work plan, if required, and development and reimbursement agreement, and bill the developer for his work in a not-to-exceed amount of $20,000 per Brownfield policy. The end. So you know what we gotta do?
So what I'd like to do is have Roman and myself kind of give the board a brief overview of this project. I'll start, and then I'm going to let Roman talk about some of the other maybe more technical items in the application about the actual eligible costs and what have you. But the background of this project is the building's been vacant since the Dahl Reedmore closed. I don't know, Shelley, 15 years ago maybe. It's been a long time.
Yeah.
And in the interim, there was a party that had bought the building and was proposing to turn it into a listening room and a recording studio and a small performance venue. And that project just never got any traction. The developers were kind of in and out and decided to not go forward with it. So subsequent to that, it was bought by a developer that's got a good track record and some means financially to be able to see this through. And they're proposing to basically redevelop the whole building, kind of as was described in the agenda item.
Yeah.
They're very excited about the project. They think it's very viable. They're planning on getting started just as soon as possible. So that's part of the reason we're going to have that meeting in January, because they want to get going. They've been meeting with Mark Miller from the Chamber of Commerce, who's the city's economic development partner. I've met with them. The assessor's gone through the building and has declared it functionally obsolete. So they're probably going to apply for an OPRA, an Obsolete Property Rehabilitation Act tax abatement as well. But they haven't, quite put that all together yet. So the project itself is going to be a stem to stern renovation of the building. It really does need a lot of work. All the stuff has been pretty much moved out of the building. It's basically ready to come in and get started with the reconstruction of it. I know they're planning on having access to the restaurant facilities from both the Riverwalk side and River Street. I think that's a really nice component of the project, because the Riverwalk access to those businesses on River Street is very limited at this time, and hopefully this could set kind of a precedent to kind of have other businesses do the same thing. Roman, do you want to talk a little bit about what some of the eligible costs in the plan are?
Sure.
Yeah.
So I'll just add that the application was very comprehensive. They did a really nice job of covering all the bases. It's one of the better ones that I've seen personally, but sifting through their eligible activities, like most of these projects with kind of transaction redevelopment, you have your typical due diligence upfront work. So they're requesting that some of the pre-approved under this Act 381 statute, some of those costs would be covered. There's about $6,000 in typical environmental pre-demolition and acquisition costs, like a phase 1 assessment, asbestos, mold and lead surveys. They've included the costs of related to preparation of Brownfield plan and Act 381 work plan, which are contemplated for this project. Their asbestos surveys and lead, mold revealed some abatement that is required as part of their demolition. So that they have about $33,000 in costs related to those activities. There's some interior demo and roofing removal just north of $100,000. Their site demo, which many times could be exterior, related to some of the utility and infrastructure improvements that are required to facilitate the development. Those are just a little bit over $11,000, and then they have some right-of-way work, which is eligible as public infrastructure improvement, and that's just a little bit north of $22,000. And they've included a 15% contingency. So, as noted early on, it's roughly $220,000 to $250,000 in eligible activity costs related to the project.
So one of the things that makes this project a little bit more complicated is the fact that we also, I believe, Roman, correct me if I'm wrong, have to get the DDA to sign off on them giving up their capture, correct? So
That is correct.
So we'll have to get an agenda item. We won't have to. The DDA will have to have an agenda item when the time's appropriate, which is coming up soon, to actually give up their TIF capture. So when you layer these different economic development tools on top of one another, it becomes very complicated in a hurry. And so we're going to have to figure that out. And I've got to actually get, and Roman and I do, to be able to finish the Brownfield plan to make sure that the TIF tables are accurate. And TIF by TIF, Vidar and Corinne, that stands for tax increment financing. So the amount of money that they're going to capture due to the increase in the taxable value above what the base is goes to the Brownfield Authority to reimburse the developer. That's how this economic development financing tool works. But in order to do that, we have to be able to project what those are. And I got to get confirmation from them still that they are planning on doing an Oprah. So that's something that Roman and I still have to work through, because if they have a tax abatement, then the tax capture is less in the beginning years, and then the plan goes for a longer period. So we've got to take a look at that and just make sure we've got that accounted for. There will also be some admin fees that come back to the Brownfield Authority, because, you know, if this is a 20-year plan or whatever it turns out to be, then we have to administer it for 20 years. So we do get some money back from each of these plans. And then, I don't know if it makes sense to do it on this one or not, but the Brownfield Authority also has the ability to fund a revolving loan fund that the Brownfield Authority administers. And we did build that into the last Brownfield plan with the Hampton Inn, but it didn't get captured until the very end. So we won't see any money from that for quite a while. But I don't know if this project, you know, it's not real big, but it may be worth tacking on a few years of revolving loan fund capture, simply because developer asks for these types of incentives aren't going away, and in fact they're going to become more numerous. It's becoming almost impossible to renovate old buildings like this without substantial public-private partnership, just because the costs are just too onerous otherwise. So there may be the ability for the Brownfield Authority, once it has money in a revolving loan fund, to help some of the pre-work with these developers to get these projects off the ground and then get paid back. So maybe that could help to fund some of the initial assessments or what have you. But it's something to think about. We'll look at the numbers and see if they make sense, and if they do, then we'll try to include those in the plan if that's something that the authority's interested in continuing to pursue. But I think it's a good idea to do it on every Brownfield plan moving forward.
Yep, thank you.
I agree.
Does anybody have any questions about the, you know, kind of the general scope of the project or any of the specifics? There was a ton of information in here. We normally wouldn't have an application this long, but since they sent it in, we kind of had to include it in the packet. But there's tons of technical stuff in here that, you know, probably isn't really necessary to make a determination. But I'm sure Roman appreciated having it, because it gives him a much better idea of what's kind of going on behind the scenes.
No, I appreciate all of the information that was included. It gives unique insight into, you know, the kind of demographic that they're looking to capture. And I think it's probably going to be valuable for their neighbors on River Street, so that they can make improvements to their businesses, knowing that these are the kinds of guests they can expect coming in.
Yeah, and I will let the board know, it's a very fine line with these developers as to what kind of information they want out there. So once they turn in a public application, it's obviously subject to the Freedom of Information Act request. So I just want to be sensitive to their needs on, you know, if the newspaper picks up on this, that's fine. That is what it is. But, you know, sometimes some of this stuff can kind of undermine, especially if they're in property acquisition phase and that sort of stuff. In this case, they're not. But it just becomes a real balancing act to try to make sure you don't prematurely damage a project. So I don't think we have any concerns on this one at this point, but just something to keep in mind.
Absolutely.
Roger, I have
Go
a
ahead,
question,
sir.
If I may.
Yes.
Ed, this is Vidar Lerum. I'm new on the commission, so I'm in a learning phase here. There's a lot of terms that are thrown out that I don't understand, I must admit. And you said that the whole financial package is pretty complicated. So as a member, I feel that I'm not really yet up to speed in terms of understanding this type of project. But I do have some questions to the material that was presented to us. For example, there are plans showing for 5 suites or small apartments where, in my opinion as an architect, I understand this is very preliminary, but those plans there are a lot of questions to ask about those plans. I mean, there are...
So Vidar, can I stop you for a minute?
Sure.
we've got to be real careful as an authority that we don't kind of go outside of our sandbox. The design of the structure itself really isn't in our purview directly.
No.
So if they wanted to put 10 suites in there and they said had an architect that could make it work and it could meet the building codes, then they can do that. If they wanted to put 5 because they wanted them bigger, they can do that. And they're going to have to meet all the building codes, and they're going to have to pull building permits, and they're going to have to go through whatever planning and zoning process. We're tasked with looking strictly at is the project that they're wanting to do eligible to be approved for a brownfield, and to have brownfield tax increment financing, and do we think that overall the project will be a benefit? Because obviously if it's not, then why would you approve it?
Right.
But in terms of like the details of their business plan or what their stuff's going to look like, we really don't and shouldn't be weighing in on that aspect of it.
Well, I'm a concerned member of this committee, right?
Right.
So I think it's just appropriate for me to voice my concerns,
Yes, it is.
right?
Take your time.
Even as
Roger does.
a citizen.
Yes. Yes.
And
Yes.
when I see that the plans at this stage are really not thought through, then my question is, it's not that I want to review the plans as an architect. That's not my business. But my concern is that if the plans are really not worked through, then we can get into a situation where we have seen before that we get to a point where the developer or the interest behind the project says, oh, we came up with a lot of unexpected things, unexpected costs. We torn apart the facade to the river street. Unfortunately, we cannot rebuild it. Right? And that's a situation we don't want to be in.
Right. Right.
So that's why I'm asking these questions. And
Right, and I'm not suggesting that you, as a member of the authority, you shouldn't ask those. I'm just trying to remind the BRA as to what our role is in looking at the plan.
Right.
The city and the BRA will be parties to what's called a development and reimbursement agreement, which will lay out tangible milestones that need to be met in this project. And that'll be coming back before this commission in January, and eventually will also have to get approved by the city council. And so that's where we have our chance to kind of put some guardrails on the project to make sure that we're protected. And I've heard a lot of talk about the Gateway project before the meeting, and even kind of brought up now, and I'll give you a briefing on that after this agenda item's over, but some of the information that was being discussed wasn't accurate, so I want to make sure that that gets accurate as well. So I just leave that at that.
Are you satisfied?
yes.
Okay. Connie, here, is it Connie?
It's Corinne.
Corinne, do you have any questions of
No, not really.
Regards?
It's learning.
I don't, thank you.
I do, Ed. One thing
Sure,
I
go ahead,
have,
Roger.
in your application, it said it's been reviewed by Fishbeck and the city. So am I understanding that there's no problem with parking?
No problem with what?
Parking?
So again, that's a zoning question, and we don't get into that. I mean, that's up to the developer to make sure. When you have a big project like this, the developer has to go through multiple approvals, and he's got to make them all the timing work on that. So, at some point, whether they need a special use permit or it's a use by right, that's on the developer to make sure that they have all of that done. And if there's a parking issue, notwithstanding whether we do or don't approve this brownfield plan, they'll have to deal with that parking issue. And this is a very experienced developer. They've done hotels before. They have a very experienced construction partner. They know the routine. This isn't a mom and pop operation. So, but I can't answer that question because that's a planning and zoning question that this committee doesn't really look at.
We'll see it again.
Seen it. Okay, and then my next question would be the restaurant. Do we have? I know we don't have any authority of type or style, but do we have an idea what it is? Is it another pizza place or is it a fish house or?
That's one of those proprietary things that the developer would rather not get out because he's still finalizing it with the restaurateur.
Yep.
But suffice it to say, I think the community will be happy with that.
Okay, and then last one, such as was brought up by our new commissioner, what happens if he gets 50% through with the project and something happens, they pull out and then sits there half done? Do we have any type of recourse to be?
Well, sure, yeah, because if they don't complete the project, they won't get any reimbursement, and that'll be spelled out in the development and reimbursement agreement. So they actually have to complete the project or meet the milestones, whatever we agree to in that agreement, or they don't get reimbursed.
Yeah, but I mean, if they go, let's say, bankrupt, 50% through the project, such as what's happened in cases, they walk away, and what are we sitting here with a half-empty building? So then we just have to deal with that.
That's always a risk. We try to protect the city interest through not only the Brownfield plan, but also the development and reimbursement agreement.
Okay.
But I would point out there's a lot of half-empty buildings on River Street right now, and
Yeah, I agree.
The fact of the matter is, I've been with the city for 20 years, and we've had more developer interest in the last 2 than we've had in the 18 prior to that. And property development is a risky business, and not everything's going to go according to plan, but we try to set these developers up for as much success as possible because it's in everybody's interest to see this happen and be completed and be done right. And that's what we're all kind of rowing in that same direction.
Yeah, I like.
But I guess I'll go back to our protections are in the development and reimbursement agreement. And if there's something that they don't live up to, that's in the Brownfield plan too, then it's, you can terminate the Brownfield plan. So you've got some different recourses if it came down to that.
All right. So with our authority this evening, if we approve this future expenditure or looking into, the developer has to go through the other stages of confirmation before they can continue, right? This is just one.
Yeah, I mean, they've got to get zoning approvals. They've got to get their building permit approved. They've got to get, if they're going to do any other tax abatements, if they're going to do, as they mentioned in their application, historical tax credits.
Yeah.
I think they've got their lender and their capital stack pretty much finalized. So, they've got to get a final agreement with the restaurateur. I'm probably forgetting stuff, but, it's like any complex project like this. There's lots of boxes that they have to check, and they got to make them all coordinate and kind of come together.
Well, they did a good job for the application, from pictures and the whole 9 yards. But in the future, could we ask for the applicant to attend the meeting that is to be approved at, so we could ask the applicant a question or two?
Yes, we absolutely can, and I was intending on having them be at the January meeting once the Brownfield plan was completed. I specifically didn't think they needed to be at this meeting.
Oh.
If the Brownfield Authority would like them to be we normally have 2 meetings on a Brownfield plan at a minimum. If you'd like them to be at the initial meeting and the approval meeting, I certainly can do that. We haven't done that necessarily in the past. But if that's a preference, we can make that happen, and they will be at the January meeting.
They will be, okay.
Ed, can I clarify too? This is step 1, so that they can get started in January, right? I'm assuming they've got trades lined up and the rest of it.
Well, I don't know that they'll get started in January. We're putting it on a timeline so we can, in theory, get the Brownfield plan approved by the BRA in January.
Okay.
And then get it on the city council agenda for the second meeting in January.
Okay.
In the meantime, they're still going ahead with this project. They're not waiting. They don't have the luxury of doing that. They would like to get started in construction this winter if possible.
Okay.
All right. Okay, any other questions at this point?
No.
And if not, then you would understand a motion to let them continue to move forward, correct?
Yeah, so basically the way we draft these motions is it's kind of a chicken and an egg thing. I have to have Fishbeck start looking at these plans when they come in because, we need to get back with the developer in a timely fashion. But this is basically giving approval to continue on with that process,
right,
to draft the Brownfield plan, which I'll review. I'll work on the development and reimbursement agreement. Fishbeck takes a look at that, and then at some point they'll also have to do an Act 381 work plan. Is this one going to require Eagle approval, Roman? It's all pre-approved, isn't it?
Yeah, all pre-approved, so just be straight MEDC.
Yeah, so it'll be a little less intensive, that process, so I think the cost will be less. But, those all take time to prepare too, and so we're just trying to be expedient, but make sure we get all the proper approvals. So this just gives the green light to continue on with that process.
All right. So all we're looking for is a motion to move ahead, yes or no? So with that thought in mind, that's what we're looking for, commissioners.
I motion to move ahead.
Okay,
Second.
seconded. Any discussion of the motion? If not, would you call roll, please?
Yes. Yoder,
Yes.
Fink,
Yes.
Memberto,
Yes.
Larum.
Yes.
Motion passed.
Okay, Ed, we'll see you in January, right?
Yep. Well, we still got a couple agenda items.
Yeah, right. I didn't mean it that way yet. Okay, we get to staff reports then. The staff will update the Brownfield Redevelopment Authority on the status of the current projects and any other information the commissioners should be aware of. And we will start with the Hampton Inn.
Okay, so you've probably all driven down by the beach and seen that the hotel is really going up quickly. I think they've got it roofed on and pretty much dried in so they can continue working on the rooms throughout the winter. I know City Council had the opportunity to tour the building last week, and I know the developer has offered to take people through it if they wanted to. So I'm sure if somebody here wanted to get a tour, they probably could. I could set that up. But it is moving ahead well. We have not yet, however, gotten approval from the state on the Brownfield plan that this board and the City Council agreed to back almost a year ago.
Okay.
And I reached out to Dan Leonard, who's our representative, or I guess account manager, for lack of a better word, with MEDC. And he said that the reason that they haven't approved it yet is because the developer is also asking MEDC for some other financial assistance, which we knew was going to happen. And MEDC doesn't look at those in a vacuum. They look at the whole ask in aggregate, kind of combined. And so they haven't worked out those details yet. So we actually had a meeting with the developer and their attorney to talk through some of those. I know their team was meeting with MEDC, I think, last week. I haven't heard an update yet, so I don't have any further information beyond that. But our interest is in getting that Brownfield plan approved by the state so that they're eligible to recapture those costs that they did this, and we approved this, but the state ultimately has to approve it as well, is a look back period to be able to get reimbursed for costs that they incurred prior to the plan being approved. And so that's my concern, and that's my concern that I shared with the developer. But I've got to find out where their conversations with MEDC stand. Roma, do you have anything that you want to add on that, maybe specifically about the look back period?
Yeah, so typically it's a 1 year look back. So if there were activities that took place past 12 months, they could theoretically, under MEDC policy, seek reimbursement for those tasks. So that's a little more definition on that, the window that we're talking about. So, but they're definitely, the conversations that are going on right now are very important because that will define that window. And hopefully it will include most of the activities that transpired in the last year.
So I guess the takeaway here is that project is moving ahead, but there's still some I's that need to be dotted and T's that need to be crossed at the state level, and they're working through that process. So any questions on that particular project?
Ed, did they say a possible opening date of?
They've been pretty firm all along that they'd like to open, maybe by June or in June of 2023 to capture that season.
Yeah, okay, thank you.
The second item on the list is the Gateway project, just to kind of bring some of the new commissioners up to speed. This project has been in the works for several years now. It's a project of Little River Holdings, which is the economic development organization for the Little River Band of Ottawa Indians. And the city, as part of this project, received an Eagle grant loan in aggregate of about $1.5 million to assist with the remediation and demolition of those buildings. So this project has had, it's a very expensive project, it's a very large project, it's a very complicated project, and as everybody knows, the construction environment since COVID has been extraordinarily challenging with cost increases, and also now interest rates are starting to go up, which is driving up the cost of these projects. So less than a couple of months ago, or maybe just a couple of months ago, the leadership of Little River Holdings informed the city that they were kind of hitting a temporary pause button on the project. They were reorganizing some of the leadership of this project and reevaluating kind of what it was going to look like, which is absolutely the right of the developer to do, and is kind of, I think, incumbent upon them to revisit this, because if the plan they had isn't now viable, they need to make it viable. And I know the community is disappointed that all the buildings are down and nothing's happening, but we being the city are having conversations with the developer, or will be, about what can we do to make that look a little nicer come spring if construction hasn't gotten started, which I don't think it will be. And so that is a community concern, and there's a lot of people that are rightfully concerned about that. I would argue that I think having vacant lots there actually looks better than some of the buildings that were there. But that's my opinion. Mm-hmm. In terms of the city and the Eagle grant and loan, we have an ongoing dialogue with the administration there of the grant. They understand what's going on, and we're making arrangements to make sure that we're complying with those guidelines. That's not a Brownfield Authority grant and loan. It's a City of Manistee grant and loan. In terms of the project itself, we do not have an approved brownfield plan for that project. There's been several drafts based on previous development plans, but they haven't finalized that, so therefore we don't have a plan. They've paid us for both the maximum amount, because this is a complex plan, so we still have those funds. Part of that is what's sitting in our fund balance right now. We haven't expended all of that yet. And we have involved Fishbeck. Fishbeck has some expenses relating to Gateway, because this has had starts and stops. When we get closer to having a finalized brownfield plan at some point, we may have to revisit the amount that we charge them, but we haven't gotten to that point yet. But they are reevaluating. I'm in consistent dialogue with some of the new players that are working for Little Rivers Holdings. In fact, I got another email from the gentleman while I was out of town the other day. I have to get back with them on that. So they are moving forward and looking at reimagining this project and making sure they can finance it, and that it's going to be worthy of what it was intended to be. There's a lot of misinformation out there on the street, and most of it is inaccurate. Yep. So that's the best information that I have for you, and that's kind of where we stand right now. Does anybody have any questions on that?
Yes.
Yeah, hang on, Ed. Go ahead.
Yes. My one more question I have is, how could they get the permit to demolish all those buildings without having a brownfield plan?
So the grant loan people at Eagle, under the grant and loan, they had to do work plans that satisfy Eagle's requirements. So the brownfield tax increment financing plan is kind of a separate issue from this grant loan. If this had not had a grant loan, then yeah, that would have been an issue. But because of the fact that it's being done under the grant loan and there's special requirements for that Eagle has to approve at every phase, that's why that was allowed to go forward. Roman, you deal with these grant loans all the time. Do you want to kind of weigh in on that a little bit? Because this is a pretty complex program here.
Yeah, it definitely is. There are a lot of moving parts, and if you're not exposed to it on a daily basis, I completely understand the question. But yeah, commonly with the grant and loan being as part of the incentive, basically, that's correct. I mean, you have a work plan process that has to be run through the state for them to approve that, and then once the work plan's approved, that those activities can take place. And because of the different types of contaminants on the different properties that we have, some of the properties are under different funding mechanisms, and so every parcel is looked at differently, whether it falls under grant or falls under loan. And the nice setup is that brownfield plan can be approved subsequent to any of those tasks. And again, we'll throw out that word look back, because that is, if some of it isn't covered under a grant or the loan is the mechanism that's used, there are different ways that you can incentivize that reimbursement of those eligible activities. And some of it can be through look back under tax increment financing. It is very complex, confusing, and be something that I think when we do our training, we can kind of walk through some of the projects in a little more detail and some case studies and how it all unfolds. But the mechanisms are in place to handle the costs that have been incurred at this point. And when future development does happen, that will just expedite some of the mechanisms and how the reimbursement plays out.
Well, thank you for the clarification. I still think there is a lot of lingo here.
I'm sorry, Vider, you think there's a lot of what? I didn't catch that.
There is a lot of what I call lingo, technical language, and as a commissioner, as a member of this commission, it doesn't help me to be told that it's too complicated for me to understand.
I don't think I ever said that, Vider. What we're trying to explain is, you asked a question why there wasn't a brownfield plan in place.
Yes.
And because this first phase of work is being funded under a grant given to the city by Eagle, a grant loan, and it has a separate oversight mechanism, there doesn't need to be a brownfield plan at this time. And in fact, we couldn't create a brownfield plan until we get much more information from the developer. So that's what I was trying to convey.
Okay.
And Roman's comment and my comment about the complexity of the project isn't any reflection on the fact that we don't think that the board members can understand that. We're trying to portray it that it's not a very simple project. And I think Roger's suggestion that we have some training to help bring some of the members up to speed is a great idea, and we will make that happen.
Yeah, good. Thank you for the information. I just want to say as a member, though, that I respectfully disagree with the statement that a vacant lot with fencing around it is better than a building. I disagree with it.
Not better than all buildings, better than some of the buildings that were there. I agree with you. A couple of those empty lots look awful, and we discuss it in planning a lot.
Something needs to be done to get those fences down and do something. The city cannot present itself like this
Right, sure.
to US 31.
And as I mentioned, and I'll just reiterate, the city is going to be having conversations with Little River Holdings about what can be done, and the Chamber of Commerce / DDA to improve that property if construction isn't getting underway prior to the start of the tourist season. And I think something will be done. So that those and I will certainly express the consensus of the Brownfield board, if that's their desire as well, that they agree with that plan and approach.
Ed, I have a question. My colleague brings up a great point. What is, at this point, because we see them every time the wind blows, they lose the wrap that's in there, the fences fall down. Is the fencing a liability issue right now? Is that why it's there? Is it meant to be a form of protection? Or is there a plan to put something else there that doesn't look like construction is imminent, but can give people, I don't want to say access, but a better sight lines maybe?
Yeah, so the construction fencing, I mean, was holding two purposes. One, it was an active demolition site, so safety, liability, all those. And two, it was a place to be able to put those banners, which kind of advertised Manistee downtown a little bit and told people what was going on and whatever.
Are they-
Obviously, with some of the high wind events we've had, that hasn't fared very well. And I know that the Public Works Department and or the city manager were going to talk to the chamber about getting those things put back on or if they're damaged, taken down. But in terms of a longer term plan, again, we have to have that conversation with Little River Holding. I've had an ongoing dialogue with a lot of other issues to get the new staff up to speed from information that the city has. And so I think the time is probably getting close where we can have that conversation about, okay, this isn't going to get started under construction in the spring, then what are you going to do about the appearance of the site, including the fencing?
All right, Ed, one more time.
Okay, thank you. And then I just had a follow-up for something that you said earlier, Ed. You mentioned that the conversation that we were having sort of prior to the meeting contained misinformation. I just want to clarify which misinformation, because in the follow-up that I heard from you, I didn't hear anything different than what we were talking about. So I just wanted to clarify what you heard that was misinformation.
So there's been a lot of misinformation on social media, and I thought I heard prior to the meeting getting started some conversations about, well, what protection does the city have about that vacant lot there? And we have a development agreement with Little River Holdings, and if they don't complete the project, then we have some ability to get some recourse there. So that's what I was mainly referring to.
Okay, I think we understood that. Thank you.
Yeah.
Any other questions, concerns before? I have one in regards to what our fellow commissioners suggested.